Resident Evil is a series known for many types of experiences. To some, it is a slow game with fixed camera angles and controls that everyone calls tank controls. To others, it's a third-person shooter so welcoming in its controls and gameplay feel that it became the standard for every action game going forward. And to some, it's a first-person game that I know nothing about because I never played those games and I really only played the early Resident Evil titles. Well, in the early 2000s, Resident Evil was still basically exclusively associated with those tank controls and fixed cameras. Shake-ups to the series hadn't happened yet. But on the handheld front, things were about to change. A small British studio named M4 was commissioned to make a new Resident Evil game exclusive to Nintendo's Game Boy Color. And this was all thanks to the team working on a prototype game for Dino Crisis on Game Boy. And then Capcom said, nah, we don't care about Dino Crisis fans, let's get a Resident Evil game. It's weird how nothing has changed in all these decades. This was specifically meant to be a whole new game built from the ground up to appeal to Resident Evil fans, rather than a direct conversion of a console game because it would have issues working on Game Boy Color, as evidenced by things like the Game Boy Color proof of concept for Resident Evil 1, or the Gamecom version of Resident Evil 2. At the end, the result of Resident Evil Gaiden, as it was called, is a game that feels tailor-made for this system. It's free from awkward controls, and outside some performance stutters, it is basically a faultless game for the Game Boy Color. Though, it does have the benefit of being a very late release game for the system, coming in December 2001 in Europe, March 2002 for Japan, and all the way in June 2002 for North America. For context, Japan and America both got this game when the Game Boy Advance was a year old. Though America needed all that extra development time to get this great box art and replace it with one that doesn't even show the main character. Because despite what this box art shows, Leon Kennedy is the secondary protagonist here, and actually the third one you unlock during the game. This is Barry's big breakout game. Yeah, Barry! I love him! He's that guy that assisted Jill during her campaign in the first Resident Evil. He's an OG, but he's massively overshadowed by characters like Jill, Chris, and even that rookie cop from the second game. Poor Barry, at least I still love you. This game makes an amazing first impression. It starts up with garbled audio on the title screen to let you know what series you're playing. Then it opens up to a stylish cutscene with limited but effective animation. Barry is informed that Leon was picked before him to be the game's protagonist, typical, but the team has lost all contact with Leon because he couldn't do his job properly. So now Barry has to go to this luxurious cruise liner that the game will be set on. Good job, Barry, you'll be the one to save the rookie cop, and I'm sure you'll get many more adventures after this. The gameplay immediately starts with us quickly coming to terms with all the basic mechanics, though a lot of it is conveyed in walls of text which aren't fun to read, but they are all stored in our PDA so we can return to them whenever we need a little refresher for all the mechanics exclusive to this game. The game is split into two main gameplay modes that blend together seamlessly. Most of your time is running around, very traditional overworld movement, you'd see this in lots of top-down games. But we even get diagonal movement here, fancy. And damn, that running animation is top-notch. This screams extremely late release for the hardware. In fact, all the environments here are gorgeous. It's no wonder the game has to sometimes slow down when there are too many enemies on screen at once. It's an unfortunate result, no doubt, and I've seen people hate on the game for this. It's something that sequels for Game Boy Advance could have alleviated, but we're stuck in the timeline with just a single Gaiden release. At least 10 years later, we got Resident Evil Revelations for 3DS to kind of fill that role, and oh my god. Yeah, it was only 10 years between the release of Resident Evil Gaiden for Game Boy Color and Revelations for 3DS. This makes me a bit uncomfortable, I don't really like this, but I guess you all have to know this too and be haunted by it. The most interesting tweak to the gameplay here comes in how this handles combat. It's trying to simulate Resident Evil gameplay the best it can, and it did a really interesting compromise. Your character will stand awkwardly still and shoot enemies just like always. sometimes multiple at a time trying to overwhelm you. But instead of seeing it from third person, this goes into a first person view where we see the zombies approach. There is a bar underneath the undead that represents our field of view, and it has a little sweet spot that is our accuracy. A smaller bar will rapidly swing across the screen, and we need to shoot whenever that lines up with that sweet spot I mentioned. This registers a hit, anything else is a miss. It's all timing based, and don't linger too long on this to line up your shot because the enemies are approaching you. Time doesn't stop for this. Double check the entire first person view as well, as it does extend a little beyond your initial perception. Some zombies might just be at the corner of Barry's eye and you can't really see them properly, but swing to the right or left and you'll be able to see them. Otherwise, if you keep waiting, they will make themselves more apparent as they get right in Barry's face. The starting distance of these enemies is all based on how close they are when you first engage them. In the overhead movement portion of the game, we can pull out our gun and aim it right for a zombie. The further away we do it, the further back they are for this combat encounter. This also means that if a zombie touches Barry before he can ready himself properly, the encounter will start with the undead at maximum proximity, and it will get an early swing at you. It might seem easy to just completely avoid encounters since they're right there on the screen standing out obviously, but the game does try to force encounters onto you because there are zombies lying in wait in the shadows. Yeah, this game's excellent art direction isn't just a stylish touch, but they use it to actually pull off surprises like this. And thanks to just how beautiful this game is, there are lots of shadows there, and you'll be a little paranoid and you'll want to check each one to make sure nothing is there waiting for you. But even if you knew where every enemy is placed because you've replayed this game a billion times, you're still incentivized to avoid combat wherever you can, because ammo is very scarce. Your best option is to awkwardly walk around the zombie coming at you, like you're two different people on a footpath walking opposite directions. That isn't to say you never get to experience the super fun combat here. Sometimes it can't be helped, especially with the main game's antagonist being a BOW, big surprise. But also, sometimes our protagonists are just psychic, and they seem to know when an enemy is carrying. An icon will appear on screen with an accompanying chime to let us know, oh, one of those zombies near us? It'll drop items upon death. It's worth getting into these specific encounters because it'll either drop healing herbs, more ammunition, or plot required mandatory items like keys. This is kind of a band-aid solution to make it so you don't get into too many fights while making sure you get into enough for the game to still be satisfying, and it allows for item drops without leading to a situation where you kill every single thing in hopes of getting items, and then shooting blanks 90% of the time. But damn, is this a band-aid solution that I gel with. The game feels so satisfying with the right level of combat encounters, the right level of running away, and being told when combat has to happen. If you find yourself in an encounter you'd rather not waste ammo on, you can run away anyway, but it requires very strict timing to accomplish. Or you can switch to the handy knife, which has unlimited uses, but obviously only works at very close range when an enemy is already trying to eat you. During battle, we can open up our inventory to switch weapons or to heal. Once again, the fight doesn't stop for this. This is real-time item management. Thankfully, healing items in this game are plentiful, so don't be afraid to use the knife. The game expects you to get into the splash zone a bunch, especially as we pick up different levels of body armor across the game to mitigate direct damage. And when you have more than one character in your party, you can switch to them to make it so only they receive damage. They can also be equipped with other weapons, so weapon switching can be instantaneous as you put a different character in the front. At most, you'll be controlling 3 characters, but most of this game is in the 1 or 2 character range. It sometimes feels like a missed opportunity not to mine everything out of these mechanics, but also the more characters you have, the less danger you feel like you're in, and switching is so easy and it essentially doubles your health, so from a genre perspective, I'm glad they limited as much as they did. Those extra characters will be discovered during the course of the game, one of which is the pseudo-protagonist, Leon Kennedy, and the one you'll have much more often is a little girl named Lucia, who inexplicably still shoots from the same angle as these 2 grown men. I like to imagine Barry and Leon hold her up so she can get a better shot. You're always playing as Barry or Leon, and the little girl isn't ever playable on her own. She's more of a sidekick that's plot relevant. But because we play as Barry and Leon, the sprites for our character changes very slightly to reflect this. Grey for Barry and copper blue for Leon. It's such a small detail, and I wouldn't really expect the game to do this since they're mechanically just the same guy. In fact, their inventory is shared across every character, so when Barry and Leon do split up, they still have each other's equipment with them for some reason. So changing the sprite didn't need to happen. This game is very limited in its visuals at the end of the day, but they still did it, and I'm really impressed. In fact, just to get to that inventory thing I touched on, this is the least Resident Evil feeling thing in this game. Our inventory is unlimited and items stack. It's convenient, it's fun, but it's almost an insult to the way the earlier games were constructed, where we had a deliberately teeny inventory of items and had to switch things out constantly. None of that is here. We have no magic transporting item chest, and our pockets are just that instead. Carry every single weapon at the same time, and all their ammo, all your herbs too, and all the keys this game is built around. Have everything on you at once. The inventory simplification continues as we don't combine items anymore, which basically kneecaps any puzzles in this game. They're a staple of the series, but here it's just reduced to, here's a key, put it in a door, and since you carry every key, you don't even have to prioritize what items to take with you, just go to the door when you're able to go to the door. No combining also means that ammo is very streamlined. Every gun holds the entire amount of ammo you got in your inventory, even if it makes no sense. And herbs immediately are able to heal you without any kind of combination shenanigans. They just come ready-made in different flavors that heal you for certain amounts, and sometimes they can heal poison. To some die-hard fans, this might seem like sacrilege, but I assure you all of this works well together, and I never missed the absences. It's just when you think about it, you go, it's not very Resident Evil, is it? The mechanics all work wonderfully in the vacuum of this game, especially because of how it handles exploration, combat, and ammo management as a whole. You may have noticed earlier when I listed all the inventory you have, I didn't talk about ink ribbons. Well, that's because saving is done in an entirely different way here, and lots of people I've seen online don't even seem to understand how the saving in this game actually works. As you progress, you're presented save points that you can manually save the game at in any of 3 different slots. These are very infrequent manual saves, and they're usually done at very specific turning points of the story or setting. Because of this, I've seen some derision online saying that saving is too infrequent and the game is too punishing because of this, making you redo large chunks of the game every time you die. And because of that, this game needs save states to properly be enjoyed. I don't want to dwell too much on hearsay or risk a straw man, but I'll say that I was worried about this too when I first played the game, but this fear is entirely unfounded. Gaiden actually has an overly generous save feature. Whenever you die, you get to respawn at either one of your saves, or you can just continue from the room you died at as if you didn't get brutally ripped apart. Basically a do-over, and you get infinite of these. This also seems to apply whenever you just turn off the Game Boy. The battery back saved in the cartridge will continue from the last room you were at, so you can come back at a later date. This is constant auto-saving on a Game Boy Color game. I don't know how they did it. And I'm sure to some this devalues the horror since there's very little punishment in dying. But if you really want punishment, there's nothing stopping you from relying on those manual saves only. To the rest of us, it's a nice trade-off that avoids turning this game into an overly frustrating one. That said, because items and ammo are still limited and scarce, the game will certainly punish some players, and I've heard people say they softlocked the game because of that. I never really ran into that personally, but I'm sure the game could elicit frustration and be basically impossible to beat if you actually didn't plan things well. But it's also a very short game, and replaying it, but doing it better, isn't a big commitment at all. I'd say that's the intended way to play the game. This is a game begging for replays, much like the series it's a spin-off of. So if you're playing Resident Evil Gaiden and think, I can't progress any further, I screwed myself over and don't have good items anymore, just restart the game and do better. Some old-fashioned game design advice there. There's quite a bit of non-linearity here as well that makes replaying even more fun. You can go to some rooms and even get some items out of order, so this experimentation is fun to play around with. Barry's journey starts off super simple. Navigate the unlocked portions of the ship, which will funnel you down some specific paths. Bask in the gloriously detailed running animation and gorgeous environments that the undead infest. The opening introduces expertly the zombies we'll have to deal with in staggered intervals that let us get accustomed to each one's methods. We have basic ones that shuffle towards you, venomous zombies that will sometimes leave you poisoned, and there are some clever guys that carry weapons like crowbars and that will take a chunk of your health, and they can do it from further away. It is a great lineup for a game where combat is all based on watching guys get closer towards you in a straight line. That said, some more iconic Resident Evil enemies like Lickers don't show up, because their whole appeal, at least initially, was based on the 3D environment and how they could get you, thanks to the fixed camera angles. So we're deprived of some more sprites here, and we just get the fairly simple zombies over and over, but given the gameplay they're working with, I don't mind this at all. And on those sprites, I've just got to say, they're wonderful, and I like seeing the sprites get more detailed as the zombies get closer towards you, and the animation for when they attack you is incredibly smooth. The whole combat here as well could have just taken place in a black void, but they made sure to put in some background details to show different parts of the ship. But it's subtle enough that it doesn't take away focus from the actual threat here. This is especially appreciated when you remember the dim screen this was made for. It's flavor, but it never distracts from the important visuals. One immediate grievance I have with this game presents itself in the opening, however. Despite having unlimited inventory space, we can't pick up ammo for weapons that we don't currently have. Barry will just walk past these amazing resources and think, oh, I don't need shotgun ammunition, I don't even have a shotgun. He can't plan ahead. So take mental notes when you play this game, and remember to backtrack when you get the relevant items. For this shotgun at the beginning of the game, it's not a big deal, because the shotgun is at the end of a hallway, and you'll just backtrack to the beginning of that hallway to get the ammo. No big deal. But there are overpowered weapons that you won't be able to get for a long time, and the ammo is right there teasing you. And on the backtracking note, there are some rare but still very significant instances where weapons will only appear in rooms after certain moments of a story. You can easily get to this freezer of a ship pretty early on, but you won't find much of importance. But come back here later in the game, and you can find the grenade launcher. I understand the idea of this in theory for gameplay balance purposes, but it rubs me the wrong way and kind of throws a wrench into that non-linearity I praised earlier. Plus the ammo economy is already a way to balance the overpowered weapons. This is just a wizard did it solution that basically punishes some early exploration. Maybe the zombies bring the guns to these areas when they repopulate previously vacated rooms. That's the only explanation I can think of, because at certain story intervals the undead will come back in full force. Once again, a reason to discourage killing every single thing you see. But this also fits the Resident Evil formula where this was a common practice. I only mention it because I've seen multiple people report that this game has unfair enemy respawns, so every time you enter a room, all the zombies are back again, even if you killed them. That's just not the case. They'll stay dead until much later in the game, when the story says they need to come back. This game has a big enough uphill battle with fans just for being non-canon or a weird spin-off still exclusive to one system with no re-releases, and the fact that obtaining a legal cartridge is way too expensive. We don't need to spread misinformation about this game while we're at it. On that note, thank you Etsy for making this authentic-ish looking box and manual. Thanks to you, I was able to keep my shelf looking good without going without food for a whole month. Sometimes other collectors are a good for the world and not just a net negative that drives up the cost of this ridiculously expensive and unhealthy hobby. Oh yeah, back to the game. It doesn't take long for Barry to discover Lucia, and she's the only civilian still alive on this ship, and Barry has to protect her while also being suspicious of her and her possible connection to that big scary BOW out there. Thankfully, Leon also joins and we get these two dads looking after her and teaching her to shoot everything that moves. Leon is a more trusting dad, and because of the disagreements about her involvement, we get honest-to-God beef between these men. If you've ever wanted to see Barry and Leon be allies while also arguing about a little girl, this is the game for you. Oh yeah, the BOW. This bioorganic weapon is similar to the tyrants we'd see on home console games of the era, but the menace is unfortunately greatly reduced here, because the combat is just watching the tyrant walk towards you, attack you, walk back, and repeat. This guy also only shows up in very scripted boss fights with lots of build-up, so we don't even get the shock factor of before. That said, the BOW sprites are once again top-notch, and these are imposing fights, especially if you're low on ammo. The second half of this game is when it really shines for me. We have full access of the ship, and you control multiple characters with multiple weapon types, and the way each weapon functions is fascinating. The pistol is our introduction and is a great beginner-friendly weapon. The timing for this isn't too strict, but it's still tense enough to keep the game's atmosphere in check. But the more powerful weapons like the shotgun, the assault rifle and grenade launcher each get harder to actually hit your target because of the stricter reaction time required, but each one delivers increasingly stronger damage upon a successful hit. In addition to ammunition scarcity, this is another way the devs managed to balance everything. Your little pistol will still get use in the game at the very end. It is your most reliable weapon, but it's still your weakest one by far. But you're safe for quite some distance every time you start combat, so use your pistol to get the stragglers at the back, and then whenever they get closer to you, switch to one of the stronger weapons. The unlimited inventory space comes alive during these moments, as you equip each character with different weapons and switch as the zombies approach. Conversely, we get the gas launcher here, a weapon with very limited ammo to spare, but this is your crowd control. You don't need to aim it, just shoot and it'll kill everything in sight. It's there for when you really need it, but don't rely on it because you can't. Late game isn't just the gameplay high, but aesthetically, the ship continues to astound. This really feels like a ship, even with the limited presentation of the system. We see all these ritzy public areas, all the workers' quarters, and the grey mechanical sections deep down that power this ocean liner. Every portion of this map feels unique and entirely lived in, even if the inhabitants aren't alive anymore. We even managed to get the traditional Resident Evil classic of the game all takes place in an umbrella base, and it's represented here with a submarine that continues to be breathtaking. The constantly impressive visuals do come with a single drawback that I alluded to earlier, and it's either a small hindrance or something that ruins the game for you depending on who you are. When traversing the map, the game will sometimes slow down when there's lots of enemies on screen. It's very noticeable, but also it never really impacted my enjoyment. That said, I've seen it in the list of reasons why everyone seems to hate this game, so I'm just throwing it out there. Your mileage may vary. This is very clearly a divisive game, but there are some mega fans like me out there, and there's probably one or two others. But this is still one of the most beautiful games for the entire system, so I'm happy that we got what we did, but this is really one of those games that would have benefited from a Game Boy Advance release instead. The GBA was out when this game released in all territories, and rather than being a swan song to one system, it would have been a really nice early Game Boy Advance title. You can never go wrong with having more buttons, and that extra storage and all the extra hardware capabilities wouldn't have done wonders for this game, but it would have still benefited from that performance bump. In fact, my personal biggest grievance about the Resident Evil series as a whole is we didn't get more of these games. The Gaiden series could have been strong side games for Game Boy Advance and DS. These are very much products of their time, small side games that adjust the gameplay and scope to fit the restraints of the hardware they're working with, but are nevertheless amazing. Nowadays, with portable gaming just being the same as home console games, but a little less visually impressive, Games of this ilk are limited to small indie throwbacks that few people will play unless it wins the indie game lottery of becoming the one game people won't shut up about for a month, which then leads to others not playing it because it has a quote, annoying fan base. I think I made myself sad and spiteful. I didn't want to do that. Resident Evil Gaiden is such a great game, I don't want to make myself sad about it. This game is a masterclass in how you make a Game Boy Color game, or how you make a spin-off for less powerful hardware. It's not faultless by any means, no game is, and there are things I would have liked to see touched up, or refined, or improved upon with a sequel, but at the end of the day, this little experiment is amazing. Replaying Resident Evil Gaiden is an excellent way to spend the day, and it's the kind of game always begging for replays, and being able to skip every cutscene means the pace never has to falter when you boot up the game again. Oh, I didn't mention the music at all, did I? It's eclectic and dripping in mood. Some of these compositions are amazing when you first hear them, and then they loop, and it annoys most people who play the game. I think I'm immune to this, but I'd be lying if I said the music held my interest for all of my playing of Resident Evil Gaiden, and some of the tracks weren't good the first few seconds, let alone subsequent hearings. When I said this game would benefit from a Game Boy Advance version, big part of why I said that was because of the music, and you know it's dire if I'm saying the GBA would do it better. Something else I can do better is the PlayStation Portable, and also the Nintendo DS. That's because next time I'm looking at Ys 1 and 2 for both the PSP and Nintendo DS, two very different remakes of some classic action RPGs that have a very passionate fanbase. So if I suddenly pronounce the series differently next time, it's because I got yelled at by everyone who watched this video for not saying it the right way.